Hey folks, welcome again. It is the interview. I'm Peter Catalano, and we get to again meet Emily Taylor. If you're curious more about her, you can check out the previous video where she talks about guardianship. But today, Emily wanted to come back and be back on the interview to talk more about business succession planning. As a financial advisor, I've seen a ton of businesses, business owners, I should say, looking to sell their business. In fact, I think we have a lot of baby boomers up there. The kids are grown, the kids have moved out, and they're ready to move that business to another level or another person. And there's a lot of businesses for sale. And, Emily and I talk quite frequently about, why are these guys struggling in selling their business? How come, why is there this, succession planning, with so many businesses being so kind of a struggle out there? So, Emily, welcome back to the interview and appreciate your time as always.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Oh, my pleasure. So let's get into this the background here. Let's get into the succession planning. What are you seeing in the marketplace? Are you seeing businesses as I am coming up for sale, and a good amount of them at least, or and how are people prepared, for that succession? What are your thoughts right now?
Sure. I would say I see it all over the place. When people come to me, they're maybe preparing to put their business up for sale. Sometimes it was a, legitimate or an intentional plan, right? They're going to put it up for sale. And here we go. Here's what we want to do. Here's when we want to sell. Here's the number we want. Sometimes they come to me and say, hey, we got an offer we weren't expecting. Should I be selling my business? And then other times it's, part of my typical estate planning discussion, which is when I'm gone, what happens to my business, assuming I still have it, right? So it all ties together, but I'm seeing it all, especially right now, after 2021, when everybody was anticipating big changes in the tax laws. People are thinking about gifting their business, selling their business, all kinds of fun conversations with CPAs about capital gains and, and estate tax and how it's going to impact all of those things. So seeing all the big questions.
That's fantastic. And I mean, we could talk for hours on end about all the different places and how to structure a sale, but we try to limit this to 10, 15 minutes. So let's find a topic, just real quick. I see the opportunity for businesses, right? They can sell it to the family. I'm building my business so my kids can take over. And I call that selling to the family. They can sell it to a competitor. They can sell it to a client, walk away from the business, or have an employee take over, sell it to the employees, an ESOP type of a deal. And all of those are an option. And I'm a believer, when you're setting up a business, set it up with intention to sell. So at least you have the books and records and everything in order, and you're going down the conversations, hopefully on a consistent basis with your advisors, just in case one of those five show up. Out of those five, what would you say that you're seeing most of? Is it leaving it for the kids, selling it, leaving it for the kids? You seeing just strangers coming in and asking to buy them up? Any percentage one way or another?
Sure. So let me first speak to your comments about planning to sell from the beginning. I think that is its own challenge and maybe its own topic of conversation, because although I think most business owners would tell you that is in the back of their mind or was their intention from the beginning, when it comes time to make that decision, a lot of them have trouble really giving up their babies, right? So, but anyway, to your other question, I'd say that most of what I see is people trying to prepare for often a lot of selling to their family or leaving it to their family. And that can be a really complicated discussion because there's a lot of pieces involved when it's not a purely, professional business transaction. And although they'll swear up and down that it is, you've got the kid that is already involved and hands-on, who would be set up for it. You have the kid that might be showing some interest. Maybe they're young. Maybe they're a little too young to have the conversation. And then I have a client right now who tried really hard to get one of his children to be interested in the business, and ultimately it just wasn't going to pan out. And so what do you do with that kid, if anything? How do you make them feel whole? And how do you set it up to be fair, right?
Yeah, my wife always says fair is where you get funnel cake. There's no fair in our household. So and I get that. In my little history, I haven't told you this yet, but I'm the youngest of five, and there's a 20-year gap between myself and my oldest sibling. And my father had a business for 35, 40 years. And when it came to retiring out, my oldest brother, second oldest, was running the business. He was what you were talking about. He was in the family, and I was a young kid. And none of the other family members wanted to buy up the business. So we had this issues right to home, right? And one of the ways I equalize, I don't call it fair per se, but I equalize is through an insurance agreement. So brother A, who wanted to take over the business and receive value, and he received his income anyways, but received the shares or the value of the business at X, we just bought insurance on mom and dad, and we put it inside a trust and had that equivalent value for the rest of the kids. And that's how we balanced out equalized it for everyone else. But there's a lot of different ways we can come about that without using insurance or, setting up family limited partnerships or whatever.
Right. Sometimes they're comfortable with, so I'll agree, insurance is a great instrument for that in the right circumstance. Sometimes there are existing, retirement accounts or some other account that we can use and play with beneficiary designations.
Good idea.
The challenge becomes you need good drafting to be sure that any expenses are also, of the estate are also going to be equalized, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's a challenge. But you bring up partnerships, and that's a great opportunity too, because there are some people. I have a client that we recently helped to. They have three kids. They have one son who's very involved. He's going to take care of it. He's going to move it forward, but they want it to be equal. And so they've decided that they're going to give the interest equally to the kids, but that this one child will be the general partner who will have the control. Right. So he's got the control. They trust him to make the right decisions. He'll share equally with his, with his siblings. And maybe we put together some kind of management agreement, or he's getting a salary that they're not, and it will, it'll all shake out. But there's definitely ways to give your business away in a way that feels fair for everybody, whatever that looks like.
And I like that idea, right? I like that the child who is active in the business gets paid. You're gonna have to hire a manager anyways. You might as well pay them the fair salary or commensurate salary for their services, and whatever flows through cash flow wise, whatever the business is going to retain is shared and distributed according to whatever the agreement is. That's a real great way of looking at it, and discounting the value of that business through a limited partnership arrangement so that those shares or that entity can be passed down. It's a great tool. And I love hearing that you're working that or doing that kind of idea. What kind of businesses do you have a industry that you are, that's been gravitating towards you or you're most comfortable working in and helping, business owners?
Sure. So I've seen all kinds of industries, from hospitality to professional services and offices. But I'd say what I probably see the most of is real estate. And it could be clients who actively are maybe in commercial development, right? To the clients that I have that just have kind of a string of rental properties and they do a lot of property management. So I see all kinds of things. And sometimes that presents its own opportunity when it is real estate we're talking about, where, they know that one kid would really be interested in this geographic area of properties that we own or that we manage. And sometimes they kind of split the opportunities or the business interest up that way. Even if it's not necessarily going to be equitable from a financial standpoint, right? The value of the properties, but that's what makes sense for the family. So I'd say real estate is where I see a lot of work, at least lately.
Well, the real estate market, the way it is, I think a lot of people are on the real estate bandwagon and using real estate as asset class or a vehicle for providing income. Because really, you're in business. Anybody's in business to generate revenue to live the life you want to live. Right? That's why we do business and people do business. And big fan of real estate and using real estate as an asset class. It's awesome. Now, what would you identify, or is there any common hiccups or common issues that real estate owners, face not only from from a succession planning? What would you say is the most common thing that they run into?
So I'd say there's probably two things, and it depends more on what their business really looks like. One of those things I'd say would be sometimes they have someone involved who actually has no ownership, right? But they're very involved. And so they might kind of refer to them as a business partner, but they actually have no ownership. And that can be really tricky when and if the owner or really the business operator, let's say husband and wife, and husband kind of runs the thing. There's this outside third party who's really involved. And when husband's gone, wife is in a tough spot. I've seen this in a couple of scenarios where wife wants to help or wants to step in and take ownership, and maybe that partner has no business interest. The partner has no business interest or ownership after the husband is gone. So we have this rub between the person with the know-how who may not have been planned appropriately for, right? And then the survivor who, because of a lack of planning, has ownership and no know-how. So planning ahead for that would be a place that I see a lot.
And let me interrupt. Where is that planning done? I immediately go to an operating agreement, but let's dive a little deeper there if you don't mind.
Sure.
Great scenario. Spouse A is very active. Spouse B is not as active. Partner C, I guess there's maybe an LLC, a partnership or something of that. Husband passes away. We'll kill him off first. The men always die first. So we'll kill the husband off. Wife is smart, but not active in the business. Now, all of a sudden, partner is in business with wife.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do there? What should they have done? Where should that have begun?
So it could go a few ways, right? The husband could have planned appropriately and decided whether he wanted to give the partner some ownership while he was alive. But often it's a buy-sell situation. So they come see somebody like you to buy an insurance policy so that they can fund either the business buying out the estate of the decedent, right? The wife having cash because she wants to buy in, the partner having cash because he wants to buy in. It just kind of depends on what the preferences are, but that's probably the most common fix. So you're planning ahead, right? You're planning, really, I would say once you've identified who the players are. When you're in a position where you say, oh, hey, if I kick the bucket tomorrow, this thing has some value and we have some operating issues, how do we fix it, right? You wouldn't necessarily do it when you start the business. You do it when you kind of see who the players are that need to be protected or provided for.
It's interesting because I've run into situations recently with divorces occurring, and interesting, they've managed in a couple of the businesses that I'm working with, managed to have an employee, not an owner, not an equity position, but an employee who's pretty much running the show, strong admin. And, in this case, a husband and wife are at odds and they're pretty much gone. Mm-hmm. What does somebody do in this situation? That you can't really plan for. Nobody plans for a divorce. I mean, I guess you can plan for a divorce. Maybe most people don't. What do people do in this kind of a situation? They just look for a buyer and sell, or do they try to sell it to the employee, or what do they do?
Sure. So let me start by saying I'm not a family law attorney and I don't handle divorce.
Okay.
But I've seen
it's just in the business succession through a divorce situation. That's
sure
where I'm going.
So I've seen a similar scenario, and the most recent one I've dealt with was really where one spouse just bought the other one out of their interest in the business, and they continued on. Right. Having that third party involved, sometimes it's a valuable piece, and you kind of say, well, we've frozen everything from a divorce standpoint so that we can see what the assets are. And we're going to pay this guy to kind of move it forward. He's our key man basically. And we're going to pay him to move it forward while we sort it all out. Now, the question is whether that employee is going to want to be retained when he finds out where the chips fall and who's going to have the business in their hands, right?
Good point. Good point. Right.
Whose side they're on can be an issue just from a practical standpoint.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that they could sell it, but often that's not what they want. And on the rare occasion, they can continue to work together in some form or fashion, or they continue to own it together, but maybe one of them steps away from the business if they were active before the divorce.
And I didn't mean to throw that much wrench in there. So when we think of succession planning, we think usually a term of death or a term of retirement, and turning the business over to somebody or entity or whatever the case may be. And I'm just seeing there was a study that came out the other day where the divorce rate for 50-year-olds on up is at its highest it's ever been, and which is interesting statistic to see out there. And oh, that crossed in my mind when we were talking about how do you keep a business. I mean, maybe they got employees, maybe it's not only supplying for the family, but paying for a lot of other families that are living a life because of this business. And what do you do? And what I'm hearing from you, and I agree, of course, in the same field as far as planning field, plan it, have the conversations. Don't be afraid to talk to you and say, as the attorney, and say, okay, should something like this occur, what do I do? Should I take the big dirt nap? How can I ensure that my wife is, or my husband is taken care of, and employees, step up, employee A can buy us out, or, this competitor has agreed to come in and take over, which happens a lot in the financial services arena. Solo guys like me have arrangements with other advisors to make sure the clients are continued. Get that planning done in advance. Have the conversations.
Absolutely. And, I live in the world of estate planning and probate. So I talk to people every day about conversations they don't really want to have. Yeah. But unfortunately, divorce is really no different. It's not inevitable, but it is a conversation that people need to have. And sometimes it, leads us down a road of setting that up in the business documents, or even in a prenup or a postnup, if that's appropriate too. So there's lots of avenues and creative ways to figure out what that's going to look like for people if they ever even need it.
Right. When they're having it and not needing it is really the ideal. But I see way too many people who need it and don't have it. And that's where the emotions come in and everybody's fighting each other. Right. The other area, and I'd love to dive into this next time, is partnership. As I love your example, husband and wife own an entity, maybe have another partner, non-equity partner, or somebody who's active in the business. Husband dies, what's wife do? Can that non-partner do a buy sell and buy out from the estate, or all of that's great discussion. And then you've got, and I see a lot of this in the real estate arena, you got a lot of partners. You got a lot of partners that are coming in with the money, and then you got the other one who's doing the work. And all of these arrangements out there makes me think there's a lot of buy, sell, and partnership agreement conversations that should be had out there.
Absolutely. I'm really planning those through. I do have a client right now who's got they own an interest in a partnership that has been around for a very, very, very long time. And almost everybody that has ownership now had nothing to do with it. They're at least one generation removed from when it started. Wow. And nobody actually wants to own it anymore, but nobody can kind of wrangle all the partners to get rid of it. So that's an interesting issue too, when you don't kind of think through, okay, well, what if I just want my kids to inherit it? It's passive income. It's not a business I'm really having to do a lot of work for, be active in. We just own X and collect rent or whatever it is. What happens when they don't want to do it anymore? And do we really know the general partner? And, sometimes it's just information and record keeping that people fall short on that can have much bigger impacts than you anticipate.
I'm so glad we had this time to talk. We're going to have to end it here because I promised people to keep this as short as, try to keep it under 15 minutes. I know we went over here, but thank you for your insights as always. I think that People, what I'm taking away here is if you're in the real estate arena, if you're doing the flipping, if you're buying a commercial property, using it, building it up for that passive income, hoping to leave it to your family. If you've got partners, you're collecting funds from somebody, but you're doing the work, whatever the case may be, get your partnership agreements in place, your operating agreements, your partnership agreements, and your buy sells. Be
Absolutely.
clear. Who is this business going to go to if somebody takes a big dirt nap? What happens? You got to smile. I should be careful. I say big dirt nap all the time, and people are like, "I've never heard that term before," and it's a little
Well, I
crass,
was
but
just thinking it. I've been in this business for nearly a decade and I've never heard anybody say that, but it's pretty funny.
I appreciate that. I'm here to please. I'm here every Thursday. Come back and come on back. So Emily, thank you for taking the time again on an interview, and please come on back sometime.
Thanks, Peter.
Pleasure's mine.